Hey guys, Dave here. Welcome to Computer Hobbyist. Today I want to show you how to create a Doubleback game. I'm not going to do the full game, but I'll show you the basics of how to get it running, and you'll learn enough where you can continue the game on your own. Reason I chose a Doubleback game is because everyone else has done Pong games or Space Invader games, so I wanted to make it a little bit different. You're probably wondering what a Doubleback game is, so let's take a look at a little YouTube video here someone made. This is from High Retro Game Lord. Essentially, you got a little snake, and objects will come on the screen like this is a magnet, and you got to circle the objects in order to destroy it. And if you circle like 2 at once, you'll get more points than if you circle them 1 at a time, and so forth. You got roller skates and stuff. The roller skates kind of move towards you. But yeah, this is just the basics of it. This is a really old game from, it might have been 1979 or 1980, whenever the color computer first came out. I think this is one of the first games that was made for it. So anyhow, let's take a look at the code now. All right, let's start with the assets. All right, so our assets is we have blip.wave, which is just a little noise that's made when the game starts. Blip2.wave is made when a object is circled, and then you got error.wave, which will play when you accidentally run into the cherry and kill yourself. And then there's just one sprite sheet, and it's very simple. This is a cherry sprite sheet. It's just got a cherry, and the 50 next to it shows when it's destroyed to show you that you just earned 50 points. All right, let's start with the base game object class. Essentially here, all my renders that I'm using, they all use layer depth. I've learned the hard way that it's always a good idea to use layer depth. Some of the base object properties, you have the ID, cell dimensions, position, and then you also have visible, whether it's visible alive, if it's still alive, the texture, which is very important, and there's the layer depth. And the constructor for a base game object just sets visible to true and alive to true. All right, here's the render you'd use without a sprite sheet here. This is what you use to display text here, this render that also has layer depth. And here's the one you will use with sprite sheets. So that's all the renders you're going to use. All right, so let's go to the snake class. Snake class here, the constructor takes a texture, position, layer depth, cell width, cell height, snake length, and an ID. I always give everything an ID, whether it's going to need it or not. And they get set here. The way the snake works is the snake is not created from a GIF or a JPEG or a PNG or anything. You're just using the texture to create a 2 by 2 box, and 2 pixel by 2 pixel box, that is. And the snake is made up of many segments of these boxes. That's where snake length comes in here and stuff. And here's your snake list up here, which holds each segment. All right, and when you render it, it's just rendering each segment of the snake here with this render. That renders in the base game object. This inherits from base game object. All right, here's handle game input. We're doing the game input here with a joystick because it's not really meant to be used with a keyboard because you're circling stuff and so forth. So a joystick's really the only practical way to play this game. I'm using an Xbox controller, a Bluetooth one. All right, so just checking the capabilities to make sure you got a gamepad here and making sure it's connected. And here's where it's get the gamepad state. Handle game input here is called by the update in the game1.cs. All right, here it's checking if it has a left X thumbstick, and then it's taken the value of that to get the position.x. And as you notice here, I'm taking state.thumbstick.left.x times 2.0. So it gets speed. If you push, for example, if you're pushing the stick all the way to the left, the snake will go faster than if you're pushing it slightly to the left. And same here for the Y coordinates here. And here's how the snake moves. The first thing it does is it removes the tail from the list here, and then it inserts a new segment at the front and gives that the new position. All right, here's check for collision with other. This will check to see if you've collided with a cherry here. And I initially do a rectangle to rectangle collision. And then after that, if there is a rectangle to rectangle collision, then I do a per pixel collision. Basically, per pixel collision means that you're checking to see if you bumped into an opaque pixel on the sprite. So if you're just bumping it into a transparent one, it doesn't count it as a collision. All right, and this is check for collision with self. This will be used when you circle something, so the update will check for the collision with self, so that will tell you if the snake has made a circle. All right, here's rectangle to rectangle collision. This is just standard collision detection here. Here's a per pixel collision. This is a bastardized version of it. Reason for that is the snake itself has no transparent pixels, so you don't have to get the color data for it. So it's skipping getting the color data for the snake. But other than that, it's a standard per pixel collision algorithm. And down here is where you create the snake. It adds all the new segments to the snake list here. All right, let's go to cherry.cs. This one, constructor gets a texture, position, layer depth, cell width, cell height, sheet location, total. Sheet location is where it's located on the sprite sheet, the segment that you're getting the texture from. And then total rows, total columns, and here's where you put the points, and I'd send that 50 there. All right, so here's the update that's called, if you're dead and the time left is greater than 0, then it makes time left equal to time left minus 1. Reason for that is when the cherry's killed, you want it to remain on the screen for a short period of time. And then if it's dead and time left equals 0, then you make visibility equals false, so the cherry no longer shows on the screen. All right, here's your render, and using layer depth, of course. And here's where you check if it's looped. So what it's doing here basically is it's taking the top position of the box, the bottom position, the left and the right, and it's kind of just going out in those directions. And if all four of those bump into the snake, then you know that it's been properly looped. And so, like right here, if you've been looped, you set alive equal to false. And here's where it checks above, checks below, check left, and check right. All right, what else do we have to show you here? The game1.cs. All right, so the cherry width, here's a bunch of the private fields I'm using, like cherry width, cherry height, cherry points we know is 50, snake width, snake height, that's 2 pixels each way. I tried doing it with 1 pixel, and it didn't look so good when the snake was curved and stuff. It looked much better when the segments were 2 pixels than 1 pixel. That's why I did that. And the snake length, there's 300 segments. Here's a standard graphics device manager and sprite batch stuff. Sound effect list. Here's your base game object list. And snake start position, next ID, which is used when you're creating new base game objects. That's how you keep track of what the next ID is. So the first one will start at 0, and then it increments this, and the next one gets 1, and then 2 and 3, and so forth. And here's where you keep track of the screen width and height. The screen I'm using for this is a little bit bigger than the standard Monogame screen you get. Here I get the screen width set to 1000 and the height set to 600. All right, here's where you initialize everything. Nothing too fancy there. There's the snake start position. It starts at 600/150. or 600 comma 150. All right, and here's your load content, and you're loading the different sounds here, the blip 2, and the error. And then it calls create game objects. Let's go down to that. So here it creates the snake object here, and here's all the parameters it sends to it. And down here it's creating the 4 cherries that are on the screen. And if you're killed and the game gets restarted, here's what's called. It sets next ID to 0, current score equal to 0, and then clears all the game objects and calls create game objects again. Let's go back up here. All right, so here's the update. Here's the usual stuff. If you press the back button on the joystick, or if you press the escape, the game immediately exits. I think everyone should leave this in their code. Most people remove it, but you need a way to instantly exit the program. So if you go into an infinite loop or something that's in full screen mode, people have to resort to killing the window and stuff and so forth. So it's just easier just to have an escape there. All right, here's where it calls the handle game input, where it's looking for joystick input. And here it calls snake.check for collision with other, and it checks against all the cherries. And if it's true, meaning the snake did accidentally collide with a cherry, it plays a special sound effect. And then the game restarts. All right, here's where the snake checks for a collision with itself. So when you do that, you know it's looped itself. And here, down here, you're checking if the cherry has been looped. All right, and here's where you're updating the cherries each turn. Like I said, they really don't do anything in the update unless they've been killed. When they're killed, they change the sprite, uses the part of the sheet where it shows the 50, and then that stays up for, I forget if it's a half second or a second or something. And then here's just your base stat update. All right, here's the draw method. I'm using sprite sort mode, front to back. When you use layer depth will not work unless you have sprite sort mode set to either front to back or back to front. I prefer front to back. All right, so now it draws the objects to the screen. It draws all the cherries, and then it draws the snake. And here's where it draws the score. And anything else here? That's basically it. Let me turn on my joystick here and we'll execute it. All right. Circle that cherry. 50 points there. Obviously, when you make your own version of this, a full version, you're going to want to add other types of objects besides just cherries and stuff. But as you can see, choosing the 2 pixels for the snake, it looks pretty decent. You can also get real clever here, and you can make the head of the snake and have it look like an actual snake or something, have a little sprite for that. That's an idea too. Alright, so that's basically how the game works. I will put the code on GitHub so you guys can take a look at it. Like I said, yeah, play around with it. There's all sorts of things you can do with this. I mean, you could have like a Christmas theme thing, or you could have a Halloween themed Doubleback game and all sorts of stuff. Have a good evening.